And a good Wednesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Lots and lots of talking points as we head into the weekend ahead. So let's go ahead and break down your weather impact alert. If you have missed it over the last 24 hours, around this time yesterday, we did decide to issue one of these weather impact alerts for the main emphasis on this word, potential right now. This is still not set in stone. We are still trying to get a very good idea about it, but we'll talk about why we have issued that weather impact alert in just a moment. But the impact, a potential wintry mix that could lead to some ice accumulations. That wintry mix mainly coming in the freezing rain form. So of course, freezing rain is rain that falls as a liquid and begins to freeze as it hits the surface. And that can lead to the accumulation of some ice if we continue to just have water that piles on top and on top of one batch of ice. So the beginning time frame for this weather impact alert, it is still going to be for a long duration, Saturday all the way into Monday morning. And we very well could see possibly the extension of some impacts into the beginning of next week past Monday morning. But the impacts that you can see with some ice accumulation, hazardous road conditions, that's going to be a very important factor because obviously this could run into the beginning of the work week as of next week. Potential power outages. Some areas in the state of Georgia, not necessarily central Georgia, are right now anticipating a couple days without power because obviously some ice is going to down things like trees. Trees fall over on power lines. They can cause some things like antennas and power lines to freeze over. And with the hazardous road conditions, who's to get out there and try to fix them? Because obviously you can't really drive on a thick layer of ice that is on most of the roads. But there is still a lot of uncertainty on the exact locations and the specific amounts. More so, a lot of uncertainty in terms of our impacts here in central Georgia. There are some areas in northern Georgia, Atlanta, Athens, up in the North Georgia mountains that have a much better idea of the specific impacts that they are forecasting, but we'll go over the latest with our forecast down here back at home. Until then, we have 4 days of weather to cover before we even get into that weather impact alert. So clouds are going to build back in throughout today. So as we go past lunchtime on Wednesday into the afternoon hours and closer to sunset, that's when we should look at the return of some overcast skies. And eventually, behind that cloud cover, following very shortly, is going to be on and off rain all throughout Thursday, all throughout Friday. So we'll go ahead and tell you that right now. Just have the rain jacket ready to go all throughout Thursday before you walk out the door and continuing all the way into your Friday afternoon and evening. But then we are looking at the possibility of this weekend ice storm. So we'll go over what the latest model runs are saying because they're not necessarily agreeing as much as they were around this time yesterday. So here's a walk around the quad. Almost a completely sunny environment, but we still have those pesky high-level clouds that are still in the forecast. Not too much of a nuisance. They're just preventing us from not seeing those crystal clear blue skies as opposed to what we have seen over the last 24 hours, really. We had plenty of that high-level cloud cover present as of yesterday as well. Here's a look at your temperatures where we have a good mix of some low 40s, some mid 40s, upper 40s, and a few areas already at the 50-degree mark. 51 in Rochelle, 53 in McRae, and a 50 down in Vidalia. But that 53-degree mark, that's our warmest temperature that we see here in the state of Georgia. And you can see as you go down to the south and the southeast, 60s already in Jacksonville and in Orlando. 53 in Panama City, 64 in New Orleans, but a 65 takes the cake for the warmest number that we are seeing right now over in Houston. So not as frigid cold as we did see as of this time yesterday, but it is still a pretty cold air mass that we do see here in the eastern United States with some upper 30s, some scattered 40s, all across the eastern United States, whether it's the mid-Atlantic or down into the southeast or even back over into the southern plains. But we can start to see some humidity pushing up from the Gulf into areas of coastal Texas, coastal Louisiana. That's going to have big implications for their forecast as we go throughout the next 24 to maybe even 48 hours. But still a very dry environment. None of that moisture is headed up here into our forecast. And in terms of the winds, not going to be a factor throughout today. Mainly coming out of the east, maybe 3 to 5 or 7 miles per hour. Overall, not really influencing what it feels like, but we might see a little bit of a difference. If you have some winds that are, say, up to about 7 miles per hour right now, a lot of your feels like temperature is probably lower down into the 40s, but it doesn't look like anyone is still feeling like the 30s, and only one area feeling true to its actual temperature down here in Vidalia at 50 degrees flat. So going back to yesterday, 55 for a high temperature, which was just slightly below average, but a little bit warmer than we were anticipating. 23 degrees for a morning low. which is 13 degrees below average. It was obviously a frigid start to the day, but we can always put it in perspective. Like I say, that's kind of my slogan whenever we're talking about some miserably cold weather. How about 1 degree? That was your record low temperature back in 1985. So 23 degrees was mighty blistering cold yesterday morning, but at least it was 22 degrees warmer than what the temperature back in 1985 was, some about 40 to 41 years ago. 1954 was where our record high came from, 77 degrees. This is getting into the stretch of weather that we kind of did have about 2 weeks ago that was present back in the 50s, but nonetheless, we weren't really sniffing that record. In fact, we were still below average. We weren't anywhere close to that record high temperature. So no rain recorded. Your departure down to minus 1.37 inches of rain from where we should be at this point in January. Again, I'm not too concerned with this number having a negative in front of it because we are just starting off the calendar year. We'll have our fair share of some wet months coming up as we approach the severe weather season, late February going all the way into May, maybe portions of June, where we typically see our fair share of rainmakers coming through on basically about a 5 to 7 day basis, which we will talk about more once we get there. But of course, we're in the thick of winter and we continue to have all these winter weather impacts. And yes, we are talking about those potential impacts for the second time in as many weeks. Sunrise yesterday, 7:35, and sunset getting closer and closer to that 6 p.m. hour at 5:56 in the evening. So enjoying just a little bit more of daylight on a day-by-day basis. But we're flashing back to yesterday. We're at 55, once again below average. Over the course of, I guess you could say, the last 10 days or so, we have had a good stretch of 7 below average days for your afternoon high temperature. And you can see that total finally getting above the halfway mark for the above average tally that we do have at 13. I expect us to continue our fair share of near average, maybe slightly below average days here in the near future as we roll into the weekend. But then as we go into the beginning of next week, you're going to see plenty of blue boxes. In fact, we could be talking about the coldest air of the season so far, ushering in behind all of this winter weather system that is going to be passing through. So increasing clouds throughout today is the main headline, but still some near average afternoon high temperatures, 58 for an average, or excuse me, for a high temperature forecast for today. We'll take a look at your meteogram, which has us peaking at around 57 degrees. So this makes me confident we could go a little bit above that 58 degree mark, maybe a 59 or a 60 popping up, just given how much we have been over what the models have said as of recently. We went well above the models as of yesterday, but I do anticipate that cloud cover to be a bit of a factor starting sometime around that 3 o'clock window. It's really going to kind of halt the warm up that we could see deep into that 3, 4, maybe even 5 p.m. hour. Then we go into 6 p.m. closer to sunset, 52 degrees, and eventually we will drop down into the 40s, but we are not forecasted to drop down into the mid or the low 20s tomorrow morning like we have done this morning, like we have done Tuesday morning, and like we started out maybe the end of our 3-day weekend on Monday morning with. So there is going to be a slight warm up towards the end of the work week. Satellite and radar picture shows plenty of clouds in the forecast, but still of that higher level cloud cover variety. This is going to be your denser cloud cover back over to the west that is expected to creep over towards the east and hopefully put a halt to our warm up just before we reach that average mark of 59 degrees. So here's a look at this afternoon, 5 p.m. Like I said, mostly cloudy skies. And eventually, as we go overnight into the early morning hours tomorrow, that's when some scattered shower chances are already going to pop up. So it's very likely going to be impacting my morning commute on the way up here to Macon. So I'm going to make sure to grab my rain jacket before heading out the door. And you should do the same, because as we continue to go into the 9 a.m. hour, we are continuing to see fairly widespread light and steady rain showers. Still pretty good confidence that the earlier in the day tomorrow and into the afternoon, I think northern counties are going to be having the best chance at seeing some of those light showers. But just because you don't catch any showers throughout the morning hours doesn't mean that you couldn't see some as we go into the evening hours on Thursday. So like I said, on again and off again rain, mainly of the light and steady shower variety, but a few pockets of some heavy rain could be enveloped within some of this cloud cover. And we don't stop there. We continue overnight into early morning on Friday with our fair share of some spotty light showers, as we walk out the door. And then we go into Friday afternoon, right there around the noon hours, still scattered rain for your Friday evening. But then rain chances look to taper off for just a brief moment, maybe as we go overnight into early on Saturday morning, but not completely going away. Just on and off cloud cover, on and off rain. But you will see your occasional peaks of sunshine throughout both Thursday and Friday. But for the most part, going to be a partly cloudy to a mostly cloudy atmosphere. Now let's take a look at how much rain that we could be seeing over the next couple of days. And it looks like if you do get lucky, mainly up to the north and northwest, that's where we could see some totals, maybe up to a ½ inch or maybe an inch in nature. But it does look like most of central Georgia not going to get that lucky. Somewhere around 1/4 of an inch of rain or maybe just simply a trace of rain. It looks like our southernmost counties actually get left without some rain according to this latest model run of the graph. But that's not going to be of too much concern because you are going to get your fill of some form of precipitation as we go throughout the weekend. So over the next 3 days, 58 degrees for a high temperature. Later on this afternoon after a morning low of 23. Now you will notice a big difference in that department over the next 3 days. 42 for a morning low on Thursday, 45 for a morning low on Friday. This is what happens when you reintroduce cloud cover during those overnight hours and early morning hours. It keeps the numbers a good deal warmer than not only average, but what they have been sitting at in light of these crystal clear starts to the day. And your afternoon high temperatures, I want to go ahead and tell you that this is not entirely accurate. These are both going to be more of those middle ground high temperatures. Meaning that if you see some sunshine throughout the day on Thursday, I anticipate you to climb into the 60s, maybe even the mid or even the upper 60s for high temperatures. But most of central Georgia is very likely going to have plenty of cloud cover, and you are going to have your fair share of some showers throughout the day on Thursday. So 58 may be overshooting it for your high temperature. You may be somewhere in the low to the mid 50s for highs if you do keep the gloomy and a bit of a dreary atmosphere present throughout most of the day. So it's kind of a tale of two forecasts. Obviously, this box doesn't tell you the forecast for each individual location here in central Georgia, but I do have confidence in the farther south that you live that you could see some warmer numbers than the upper 50s and some more sunshine than areas up to the north will deal with. Then as we go into Friday, I think it's a bit more of a uniform forecast, but overall 60 degrees, still going to kind of be a middle ground temperature. You keep the clouds around all day, you're a little bit lower in the mid to the upper 50s. You get some peaks of sunshine. You'll be a little bit warmer, say into the low 60s, especially as you head into the afternoon, but still maintaining that 30% chance of rain, not picking apart a specific time of the day that rain is going to be present because, like I said, on again and off again all throughout Thursday, all throughout Friday. Doesn't matter what time that you're heading out the door throughout your Thursday morning, maybe Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, Thursday night, and the same for Friday. You are very likely to run across your fair share of at least some spotty light showers on occasion. So keep the umbrella and the rain jacket handy as we close out the work week. But these near average high temperatures do take a dip as we go into the weekend. 48 down to 41 on both Saturday and Sunday. The main thing that you need to know about both of these numbers and your high temperatures for Saturday and Sunday, they are both above 32 degrees. However, there is a lot of difference in between the temperatures forecasted between models. Some models are calling for mid 60s as we go into Sunday. So that obviously would take away any sort of frozen nature that we try to have with maybe some wintry weather as we go across the course of this weekend. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But right now, I'm leaning more on the side of some cooler temperatures, just given a lot of the model guidance and the potential for some winter weather. So obviously these numbers have to be a little bit lower and a little bit closer to that magic 32-degree number to produce anything in the way of that. But right now, we'll talk about why we are seeing some models pop up maybe some mid 60s as we get into the European model, specifically the latest model run of it. Morning low temperatures, they get up well above average as we go throughout each of the next couple of days. Saturday morning is off to a fairly pleasant start. This is still chilly, don't get me wrong, 39 degrees. However, it's above average and it's not going to result in anything in the way of frozen precipitation. The best chances we have for that are going to be overnight into early Sunday morning. Right now, my low for Sunday morning, 31 degrees. So we will have some areas very likely go into the upper 20s. We'll have some areas that stay just above that 32-degree mark, but 31 is the general thinking that we're going to start to feel some of that colder air as we go into Sunday. Now, here's what you stayed and listened to all of that short-term forecast yip yap about. This is what you have wanted to see. Here's a combination of the GFS and the European both overlapping one another about precipitation types and just rain as a whole all across the south. and the southeast and the deep south. This is impacting a lot of the country. Just take a look at how widespread these snow showers are. North Carolina, Virginia, back all the way over across Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, into Kansas, Oklahoma, and portions of Nebraska. But that pink shade is going to be what we're really focusing on. So right now, as soon as Saturday afternoon, some models are hinting at the wintry precipitation to already get started. The pink shade, once again, that's going to be your freezing rain. It's technically a wintry mix, which does envelop some sleet within it, but I do think for the most part, our wintry mix variety is going to be more so just some freezing rain. And it continues to show some overlap with just some general rain showers as we go into Saturday evening and Saturday night. Some models are still hinting at it being present throughout Sunday morning, which I'm leaning more towards because, like I said, we are going to see some temperatures near freezing temperature as we go into Sunday morning. But some models are still picking apart on maybe just some general rain, but it does look like whatever this is in the form of a very chilly rain, a very warm rain, that's still a possibility, or a wintry mix is beginning to move out as we go into Sunday night. And then I think by Monday morning, sometime right there around when the workday and the school day is getting started, that's when the system is going to move out. But obviously that was just a big mess. This was just a big bowl of winter soup. Let's go ahead and look at each individual model to pick apart which model is saying what. So here's the GFS. This is the one that is a little more less reliable than what the European model normally does say. But here's a look at the wintry precipitation getting started in the northern portion of the state first and foremost. And then as we go into the afternoon hours, that pink shade sags farther down, which does line up because obviously temperatures will be cooling down as we go into the evening and the nighttime hours on Saturday into early Sunday morning, where we're forecasting that low of 31 degrees. So not only is it just a widespread wintry mix, but it is long lasting, especially the farther north that you go. Keep that in mind as we talk about the next couple of graphics. Farther down to the south, it looks like that wintry mix, even if it does make it down to you, it's going to transition into a bit of a chilly rain as we go into each and every afternoon when those numbers warm up. And then as we go overnight into basically midnight on Monday, the numbers will continue to drop back down. I actually have a morning low of 25 forecasted. I believe it's 25. Take a look at the 7-day. Yep, 25 for Monday morning. Somewhere in the mid-20s, I do anticipate a lot of whatever is left, if it is still falling in the way of precipitation as we go into Sunday night and the early Monday morning, that will be of some form of a frozen nature, which you will see highlighted on the 7-day forecast. But it is worth noting that if we go the GFS route, drastic ice accumulations are going to be present. Like I said, this could very well be a non-event for our southernmost counties, according to all the model runs that we are continuing to see. But if we go the GFS route and we have that wintry mix, that freezing rain present for an extended period of time, we could see accumulations up to 1 to 1.5, 2, 2.5. I've seen some totals up to 3 inches according to the GFS model. Now this is important, and this is the main reason why we are issuing this weather impact alert so far ahead of time. There's a lot of details that need to be fine-tuned. Don't get locked up into this graphic whatsoever. The specific amounts don't really matter much, but given that we have the potential to maybe reach some amounts like this is quite alarming because we can take a look at how much ice it takes to impact things, and it is well below those number thresholds. More on that in just a moment. Let's go to the European real quick, which the latest model runs have done something kind of interesting. They are hinting at the wintry mix chance being farther to the north. So we've seen a trend away from central Georgia as far as that frozen precipitation goes, and it is simply looking like a chilly rain, or so I thought. As we go into the nighttime hours, Saturday night into overnight early on Sunday, we could see some of that wintry mix try to clip our northernmost counties, is what the latest model run is saying. Then as we go into Sunday morning, we start to see the numbers warm up a little bit. That's when we could see maybe this wintry mix transition more so into rain showers. But take a look at the shape of this big pink blob up here. Doesn't it kind of look familiar? This is looking a whole lot like our wedge setup that we normally talk about, with cooler and drier air up to the north and the northeast, ushering down against the Appalachian Mountains down here into the state of Georgia. Well, this wedge setup looks like it's only present really in the northeast corner of the state of Georgia. And it looks like down here in central Georgia, we have some warmer air. So it's going to be a clash between a colder air mass up here and a warmer air mass that's trying to surge up from the Gulf. And not even just a warmer air mass. look at some of these rainfall rates. That's some yellow. It's obviously nothing in the way of red indicating severe weather, but these are heavier rainfall rates. This would indicate maybe even some warm rain that could be present throughout Sunday afternoon. So that's the recent trend with the European model. However, I don't think it is really picking apart how dominating that wedge is going to be. Typically, some of our longer range models, they don't initialize and they don't predict well how much that wedge is going to impact the forecast. So that is what I think the European model is picking up on. It is picking up on a lot of warm air advection from down in the Gulf, pushing up down into the southeast into central Georgia. A warm and a humid air mass would lead to just straight rain here in the state of Georgia and here in central Georgia, but I do anticipate that wedge to be a bit more profound than the European model is picking up on as of right now. And it has the rain chances, the precipitation chances moving out even before the GFS model. So right now, it's kind of a flip-flop from what I have been telling you. I'm actually a little bit more inclined to believe the GFS as opposed to the European model, just given the fact that it is struggling to pick up on that wedge setup as we go into the end of the weekend and the beginning of next week. And now this graphic isn't really correlating either. If we're just going to see rain, what are we talking about? Ice accumulation. However, what we could see is a whole lot of rain that continues to fall. And then once we usher in a very, very cold air mass at the beginning of next week, it will lead to the freezing over of anything that is still standing at liquid form down at the surface. So if we have puddles on the road as we go into Sunday night and a Monday morning, those are going to freeze over. We are anticipating a hard freeze below 28 degrees as we go into the beginning of next week. And boy, if you thought that was cold, my forecast is low for Tuesday morning, 17 degrees. So yes, we are going to kick off a very cold spell. It might take a while to get rid of anything at the surface that is of the frozen nature unless we can warm up and get plenty of sunshine as we go into the afternoon hours. So that's why that model isn't necessarily picking apart things the best. But now let's go over to the NAM model, which is finally starting to get within view, and it's not bringing in anything in the form of precipitation chances until we get into the nighttime hours on Saturday. So there is a whole lot of disagreement about the timing that this starts. Right now, our general thinking is going to be the second half of Saturday. So if you have plans Saturday morning, I think you're still looking good to go. Just be very, very careful. And we are going to continue to fine-tune the exact timing of the beginning of this. But Saturday, later in the day is my general thinking. That's all of our general thinkings, because that's finally when the temperatures are going to be a little bit cooler compared to the afternoon high temperatures as we go into the evening, nighttime hours, and going into early on Sunday morning. So mainly right now it is trending to be more of an end of the weekend event. Now this doesn't mean let your afternoon plans fly on Saturday afternoon. It is still going to probably be a messy forecast with plenty of rain already in the forecast. If it's going to be of the frozen nature is still kind of that million-dollar question. But remember some of those ice accumulation totals that I told you about. 1 to 2, maybe even 2.5 or 3 inches of ice. This is how much ice it does take to start to impact things. 1/10 of an inch. This is what we call a light glaze of ice. This is going to result in some ice on trees, some icicles, and some power lines. We'll have slick spots on the sidewalks and on the roads. You just really need to express caution if we have 1/10 of an inch of ice. But now we go up to 1/4 of an inch. This is where things begin to get problematic. Coated on windshields and cars, that's where you're having to use a scraper. That's where you're really having to sit outside for an extended period of time and crank up the heat that is blowing on your windshield in order to start to melt that. Dangerous on bridges and overpasses, and it is going to begin to be tough to stop on roads. And trees begin to fall. Power lines can also start to fail at 1/4 of an inch of ice. But then when we start to see some crippling impacts of ice, 1/2 inch of ice. Those totals I just showed you are getting in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times that much ice. So obviously take all the impacts of what you see here and amplify that a good bit. Now those impacts are pretty certain and a lot more confidence in those kind of impacts up in northern Georgia. Not as much down here in central Georgia, but given the potential that we do have for a couple of inches of ice that could result in widespread impacts like you see here, widespread tree and power line damage, roads completely impassable, and power outages that could last for days. Given that we have the potential for that, that's why we're issuing a weather impact alert, because we want you to go ahead and put this on your radar. Now we're keeping our fingers crossed, and latest model trends are trending the other way, not showing as much in the way of some ice accumulation impacts. However, we will talk about what those model runs as of this morning are saying in one kind of concise graphic. So what you saw, the European model is trending northward, trending farther away in terms of that wintry mix. And it's also trending warmer, but if we are to trend warmer, we'll get our fair share of some pretty significant rainfall, and that is very likely to still freeze over at the beginning of next week. So it's still not the best case scenario. The best case scenario would just simply be a chilly rain that starts to dry out after we get into the beginning of next week. But the European model would still be picking up on some possible ice accumulation in central Georgia from just standing water that freezes over during our very cold spell next week. The GFS model is hinting at the most widespread impacts with that long-lasting wintry mix that will lead to maybe a couple of inches of ice accumulation. Now, the GFS is definitely a bit on the outer range. This is overemphasizing things a little bit in my personal opinion, but the one takeaway that we have continued to see over the last 24, 48 hours, ever since we really started throwing this on our radar, we have higher confidence in impacts farther to the north. Which brings me to my next point, which I have been saying as of all morning long. If you see a forecast for the metro Atlanta area, you follow someone on Facebook, maybe a former meteorologist that was here, someone that is north of us that you know, if they are posting a forecast, that is not for central Georgia. We have significantly less confidence than they do up in Atlanta, Athens, the North Georgia mountains about our potential impacts than they do up there. So we are continuing to show you this graphic, which I did make as of this morning, the probability of impact. So the pink shade and kind of the maroon red shade are going to be well up to the north, and that goes into northern central Georgia. And then we start to get into this yellow shade, 40 to 50% confidence in the probability of those impacts. That's kind of a 50-50 shot that we see really from areas like Thomaston to Macon over to Irwinton and Wrightsville. So it does look like kind of a line in general from Macon northward. That's where we have the most confidence in impacts as of right now. South of Macon, as you continue to go down into these light blue and kind of royal blue shades, that's where you're going to have anywhere from less than 10% probability all the way up to 30% probability of some potential winter weather impacts. Now, these categories are going to continue to fluctuate, but I just wanted to paint the picture about how drastic the confidence difference is in North Georgia as opposed to down here in southern central Georgia. We could be looking at a complete non-event down here in areas like Cordele, Abbeville, McRae, down to Alamo, which is not necessarily a bad thing. However, areas up to the north are expecting some pretty drastic impacts, especially up near the Athens area, kind of getting up into I-85 east that goes up into upstate South Carolina. So winter weather forecasting, we are still in the 4 to 6 day out window, but we are on the very beginning of it. We are about to transition into the 1 to 3 days out window, which means higher resolution models come in. So that's going to give us a much better idea about the timing, the location of impacts, and what form of precipitation we are still going to see. Right now, I do have a better idea of the specific precipitation type, but I can right now pretty confidently rule out snow. We are not going to see an event like we saw this past Sunday. We are talking about a potential wintry mix, so mainly freezing rain or just a very chilly rain. And if we go the European route, it could be a warm rain. However, we are looking at this to mainly be of the liquid form, but it's a matter of if that surface is going to freeze over. Only time is going to tell, and we will continue to get a better idea as we get closer and these high resolution models do come in. And we also look for model consistency, which we did have yesterday, and now we have none of. So obviously, as more model runs continue to come in, they will start to get into better agreement. But it is worth noting that I told you yesterday, things can and will change. We did see them change. So just like I told you yesterday, things can and still will change as we get closer and closer. We didn't really have a good idea about the forecast for this past weekend's winter weather event until we got about 24 to 36 hours out. Sometime later Friday into Saturday morning, that's when we finally had a pretty good idea and some pretty high confidence in what was going to occur on Sunday morning. And we already have seen winter weather alerts spanning as far west as New Mexico, going across Texas, Oklahoma, areas like Little Rock and Arkansas, northern Alabama, northern Mississippi. So later today, we are anticipating the extension of some of these winter weather alerts. This is going to be a winter storm watch for northern Georgia. Not too confident that we'll see one here in central Georgia just yet, but if we have any counties included in this, we will continue to keep you posted and let you know. So quick look at your 7-day forecast. Near average high temperatures, rain chances. Grab that rain jacket tomorrow morning and don't let go of it until we get into Friday afternoon and evening. And then you very likely are going to need the rain gear of some form as we go throughout this weekend. But weather impact alert starting later on Saturday all the way into Monday morning for the potential for some ice accumulations. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.